Good morning. I'm Amy Black, Executive Director of the Education Foundation, and welcome to the third and final ASA Women in Industry webinar for 2015 on using the performance management process for career development with our presenter today, Doug Dillon. During today's session, all the mics will be muted. However, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, and Doug will go into more detail on how to do that. Today's presentation is also being recorded, and so you'll be able to find it in the members only section online in a couple days. So let's jump right in. It's my pleasure to introduce Doug Dillon. Doug is the Director of Professional Development here at the Education Foundation. His responsibilities include elevating the people development capabilities of ASA member organizations and driving performance management, leadership development, and learning management. He has served as Director of Talent Management for First Supply, a Midwest-based plumbing, heating, and industrial PVF distributor. And prior to that, he was Director, Global Sales, Learning, and Development for Kohler Company, where he served for nearly 10 years. Among his credentials, Doug is a Master Certified Facilitator for an industry-leading leadership curriculum and holds certifications in more than a dozen additional curricula. He has spoken at international conventions for the Association for Talent Development and the International Society for Performance Improvement. In this morning's presentation, Doug will discuss the steps to make performance discussions a positive experience and share pitfalls that can demotivate employees. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Amy, and again, welcome to the audience of the Women in Industry section of the American Supply Association. We're pleased again to have everyone join us on our third in a series for 2015, focusing on the performance management aspect and picking apart different aspects of performance management. As you know, today we're going to focus on having the career development discussion pieces of performance management and integrating that into employee reviews. As a reminder, for this year, this is our third session. And the first webinar that we did back in March was focusing on the importance of goal setting. The second webinar we did in June was focused on handling difficult conversations in the performance management process. Thanks for those of you who are on the call today that were able to participate in those. If you happen, though, to miss either one or both of those webinars, they are recorded and available to you on the asa.net website. At the end of the presentation, I will show you a link that you can use to get to those two. And shortly following the end of this particular webinar, we will have a link to today's recorded session as well. And as we mentioned, today we're going to focus on having the integration of career development discussions within performance management and how important that can be in the talent development process within your organizations. For those of you who are connecting with your audio today via a telephone, if you wouldn't mind connecting your phone to the GoToMeeting webinar by punching the pound button along with your audio pin. Now you'll find that audio pin on the navigation bar on the right-hand side of the GoToMeeting piece. So in this particular case, you can see the audio pin is 54. So if you hit pound your audio pin and then pound again, it will successfully connect the phone that you're dialing in from to your login, and we'll be able to connect those two and know who is calling in if you happen to have questions or comments to share later on in the presentation. There will be opportunities for you to contribute to our discussion today. It's important as well when you have a question to simply raise your hand. You can do that again through the nav bar by clicking the plus sign next to the questions area, or you can contribute through the chat function by typing in a question or a comment or a contribution, and our producer here will alert me and we will include your input throughout our presentation. So please participate with us. So it's time to jump right in, and as a reminder, we've talked about this in each of the two earlier sessions, but as a reminder that the performance management process is pretty straightforward. It obviously starts with setting goals. We simply then let time pass, and then we measure against those goals. How did we do? It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Simply set the goals, let the time pass, and then measure. we have a number of different tools at our disposal when we take a look at talent within our organization. And it's important that we look at how these different tools interact with each other, and we'll pick apart two of them today. The first tool that we have in our business is learning and training, and this can take place in a number of different avenues. We have access to ASA learning content. We may have learning content that we in our businesses have that we've built ourselves. There are books, there are mentors, there are stretch assignments. There are a number of different ways that we have in our organization to increase training and learning, and that is one of the tools that we have in our tool belt for talent. We also have assessments, those measurable, observable behaviors that we're able to take a look at to see how our employees are performing in their given job. We have succession planning. Many of us, even at the top of our organizations, are utilizing succession planning as a tool to be able to help in our talent development. We have workforce planning. A number of different businesses that I've seen in our industry are planning for the different talent needs that our organizations have over time, and knowing how that plan is going to change depending on the different lines of business, the growth plans, and the strategic plans that people have. We have career pathing. We need to make sure that we connect the dots for our employees to see a long-term vision for how they can achieve and continue along their path in our businesses. And we also have performance management. Now, we're going to talk more about how we integrate these, but the thing that is so important is that we shouldn't look at these different talent elements in a vacuum. Okay, these shouldn't be seen as separate elements. Okay, they should be seen in concert together. They're not silos. We need to integrate them. We need to expand that cloud and see how each of these interrelate with each other. So in today's webinar, what we're going to do is integrate the performance management tool that we have at our disposal along with the career development tool. Now, at our first webinar last March, we talked about how sometimes that performance management tool may not look as palatable to people. Some people cringe when they think about performance management or having an employee review discussion with their manager. But if they think about career development, sometimes that particular activity can be seen a little bit easier. It's fun. I get to talk about where I want to go. I get to have conversations about what my thing is that I want to go to. I want to be able to have different discussions with my manager about where I'm going. And so if we put those two together, then we can actually sweeten that conversation. So it allows us together to be able to have the career development within performance management and make that conversation a little bit sweeter. That gives us opportunities. Now, the good news with this, as we put these together, I have for you the panacea of all career development processes. Okay, you have to get ready for this. I'm about to share the next slide, and this will allow you to move forward. It is the silver bullet for career planning. In fact, we can actually end the webinar right now when I share this next slide with you, because if you do this, every career discussion that you have, if you follow this process, it will be wonderful. It will be perfect. Are you ready for it? Here is the ultimate career plan. Perfect. Now all you need to do is follow the different steps to this model every single time, go through every one of these perfectly, and then all of your career discussions are wonderful. Okay, now so we can, those of you who get this, you can print this out and you can end the call right now. We'll allow you to move on and utilize this at your will. For those of you who need a little bit more help than this, we'll take a couple of deeper steps with this particular piece. Let's take a look at some sample career progressions that we could have in our roles, and we probably know people who have gone through a number of different iterations and looking at career development and progress. So let's say we hire someone in at the driver role, and after a while the person moves over to the counter. And after a little while from the counter, they may pop up to inside sales and do a little bit of selling, a little bit of customer service with customers. Maybe from there they move into a sales manager role where they're able to lead sales efforts in that, and then eventually they move up to branch manager. So this is just one example of a career path. And this career path may be applicable for some people in your organization, and they may be not applicable to other people in your organization. The good news is that you can create any kind of career path that you want as an individual, and we as leaders in an organization should be open to develop a career path for someone, to identify the steps that they need to show progress in each of these, and to communicate these plans. Now, it doesn't mean that every single person will have the same path, and it doesn't mean that they just have to sit back and wait for time to pass before their next promotion. It is a mutual piece where the organization can provide opportunities for learning and development and growth so that they're qualified for their next role, and that the individual employee shows initiative in completing some of those assignments, whether they are training or stretch assignments or mentoring relationships or outside readings or whatever it is, to make themselves be more qualified for those. And it's not just about time and seat. The experience is important, but it's also developing competence in the roles. So this is one particular career path. Okay? Career paths don't need as well to be linear. They could move around, and that's absolutely okay as well. So here's another example. Let's say we hire someone in to a picker role in the warehouse, and after some time that particular person moves to the counter. After the counter, maybe they jump over to outside sales. There happens to be an opening. Maybe they're not perfectly ready for it, but we give it a whirl, and they excel. That we give them some opportunities to move up into outside sales. From there, maybe they go to sales manager, and perhaps we know people that this happens to. They move from sales manager back to outside sales. That's absolutely okay as well. It doesn't have to be that a career path is always upward. A positive or forward-moving career path could have many different paths. It could include identifying a skill set that a person has. Maybe it's managerial, maybe it's not. Maybe we have an opportunity to get even more career fulfillment with a backward step. Again, just because a career path is moving from one level of an organization hierarchically to a lower level doesn't mean it's not a forward path, and it doesn't mean that there's not opportunities to find fulfillment in that. As a matter of fact, I think everyone on the call today would raise their hand and say, I would love to have lots and lots of highly motivated, passionate, qualified, performing salespeople. Not every single person on my roster needs to aspire to be a manager. And so this is how we need to have some discussions with people, because it could be okay. And in fact, we probably know people who have tried the managerial side and thought, you know what, this isn't a fit for me. I'm a better fit as an individual contributor. So be open to the fact that there might be some opportunities for forward progress, but it doesn't always need to be up in hierarchy. So when we're having our performance discussions, we're talking about the goals, we're talking about our progress, we're talking about our results. At some point in that discussion, it's good to transition into having some career discussions. And there's a number of different ways that managers can open those discussions. The first way that you could do is say, all right, so today is about a check-in about the future. Let's talk about the future. And I guarantee that this isn't a common conversation between managers and their employees on a daily basis. So be prepared for the fact that this might be a little bit foreign. It might not be a part of your culture. And when you ask that question, you may not necessarily get an immediate answer. So maybe there's some other questions that we should ask. So today is more about finding out what's in your head. We know and recognize that from year to year, circumstances and ambitions can change. Family situations happen. Different motivations come and go with our employees, and it's so important to keep, as a manager, our finger on that. Our managers need to be empowered to know that their job not is to just accomplish the day-to-day functions that's on their performance management sheet. Their role and their responsibility is also to grow the team. And to grow the team is to grow the talent about who can take the next step in different areas. And if you make assumptions about what employees want without actually asking them, or you ask them one time and you don't ask them for 20 years, knowing, of course, that things can change in their personal life and their own ambitions, you're opening yourself up for some surprises. And so we want to make sure that we explain that to them. You know, things change. We understand that. Tell me what's going on with you right now. This will help us to ensure that we hit the target and the right development plan items. So again, every manager is responsible for developing their people, far be it from that employee, especially if they've been on board for a long period of time and there aren't really major gaps in their skills. They're already really good at what they do. But we still want to continue to develop them. It's better to develop them in areas that they want to be developed, or that they know that they're aspiring to, or that they want to get to someday, and best to simply ask them where that is. And that can help to tailor development plan items for the future. So we want them to drive the discussion. So here we go. Joe, where do you see yourself in 2 years? What are you likely to hear when you say that? Yep, crickets. Okay, they may look at you like you're from Mars, but that's okay. If this isn't a part of your culture, make it be a part of your culture and understand that they may look at you like you have two heads. Okay, you need to reposition it. We need to carry on from this. Where do you see yourself in 2 years? How do you plan to get there? And what can I do to help you with that? So let's take a look at, well, I'm a picker today, and at some point I'd like to get into inside sales. Great. Thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about what that looks like. Let's talk about how we get you qualified so when there is an opening in inside sales, that you're the natural person that we think of, that we tap you on the shoulder and you're already ready for that. So let's take a look at what some of the requirements are for the inside sales position. Let's take a look at some of the learning opportunities for that particular role, and let's make a plan to get you ready for when that can happen. That's all this is. It ends up being a very casual discussion. This is not about making them sign in blood that this is what they want to do and they can never deviate from that. This is about planning. This is about taking a look at what the opportunities are. It's about kind of planning with them. And you know what? Career pathing is one of the primary things that people point to when they leave an organization. Well, I didn't see myself going anywhere. I never had that conversation with my manager. I saw myself as a driver forever and ever and ever and ever, and I want something more. Those people who left those organizations never had these conversations with their manager. And within the performance management process, you can very naturally have those because it's a big picture discussion. Okay? Make those discussions be about the employee, not about you. Okay? Don't assume that you know what they are. Maybe you had a conversation with someone 7 years ago and you know that that person wanted to do this, but that might have changed. So this provides a wonderful opportunity. It's kind of like when the time changes for those of us in the United States where the time changes twice a year. That's when they say that we should change our batteries and our smoke detectors. This is kind of the same thing. We're having a performance management discussion. It's already programmed in either once or twice during the year. You might as well have that once or twice a year conversation about career development so that you can know what's going on in an employee's life. Don't project your own path on them. Just because you wanted to be a manager doesn't necessarily mean that that's the same ambition for everyone else. So make sure that you ask them and let them drive it. As we've said already, a forward path doesn't always mean that it's going up a particular ladder. It may be that lateral moves are a part of what that energy and passion is that keeps them engaged. So explore those types of opportunities when you have those discussions. And don't be threatened if they say that eventually they want your job. That shouldn't be something that you're threatened about. Maybe some of your managers will be, but have those conversations with your peers when they have discussions with people that say, you know what, someday I want your job. Great. So how can we make you qualified for that? How can we make it so that if I do move to a different position or if I do get hit by a bus, that you are the natural choice that people look to take the reins when I'm not here? Okay, so that's all well and good, right? And we're opening the door. We're allowing them to have some conversations. We're allowing them to drive the discussion. But time out. What happens if the employee has unrealistic expectations for their career? Maybe we know that the danger in this is that people will have very lofty expectations, or they think higher of themselves than the value that they're presenting, and we have to have this turn into more of an uncomfortable conversation. It's still worth having the discussion, even though there is the opportunity for some uncomfortableness. So I'm going to open it up for some discussion right now. Let's pretend that we've hired someone very recently as a driver. And we've hired them, and they're doing okay, but they're very recent on the job. They don't necessarily have a lot of the behaviors that you would look for to someone who could move up significantly in the organization. But you're having this conversation with them. They look like this. They're a little bit casual, and they say to you, you know, I've only been here for a couple of months, but you know, I could really be the next branch manager by Christmas. Okay? They have unrealistic expectations. You and I both know that there's probably a very remote chance that they could ever be branch manager, let alone by Christmas time. But this is what they've communicated to you. They're not kidding. They're saying it with a straight face. What are some things that we could do? What are some questions that we could ask? What are some areas or paths that we could direct the conversation if presented with someone with this type of unrealistic expectation? I'd love to hear from what the participants on our webinar have to say about this. So feel free to raise your hand, or in the event that you're not linked with our audio, go ahead in the chat function and type some thoughts that you have, and we'll allow some of you to be able to participate in this. I'll give you a few minutes to think through how you might respond. Okay, looks like Katie, you have your hand raised. Let me give you or Stacy, I'm sorry, Stacy Breland, thank you. We're going to give you a microphone. Go ahead and share your thoughts. Stacy, I'm sorry, we're having some difficulty with the audio hearing you. If you wouldn't mind, just going into the chat box, hit the plus sign to the left of the chat box, and go ahead and type in your contributions or your suggestions to this. Who else has a thought or something that they would like to participate with?
Step one is suggest milestones to get there. It will quickly become apparent it's going to take longer than Christmas.
Okay, thank you, Katie. It looks like in the questions you have suggest milestones to get there. It will become apparent that it's going to take longer than Christmas. Excellent. I would ask them what qualifications they have to do the job and turn that discussion that way. Excellent suggestion, Katie. Absolutely. It's important to go to what the requirements of the job are and have them focus on that. Let's see. Who else has a thought?
The one from Sue was, I would ask them what qualifications they think that they would have to do that job and turn that discussion that way.
Okay, sorry, that was Sue communicating. For some reason, I'm having difficulty seeing the questions, and so our producers are helping with that. So Sue and Katie, thank you for responding. Let's see, Melanie has a thought as well. How do you handle career advancement in your company on a smaller side and you don't have a lot of turnover? How do you keep people engaged when advancement opportunities may take years? Excellent question, Melanie. Thank you. For those of you who may not have tons of opportunities for that, I think one of the things that you can do is use stretch assignments strategically in order to increase people's value and show them that you are still committed to their development, even though a promotion may not be available at that particular time. So stretch assignments can help by pushing on the skill sets that they have identified. So let's say that there is someone who is in the warehouse and they really want to be a warehouse manager someday, but that warehouse manager is there and is a high performer and probably isn't going to leave anytime soon. For those pickers and drivers that establish within their career path that they want to be a warehouse manager someday, for that warehouse manager to start giving them additional assignments and showing them that some of the actions or some of the tasks of the warehouse manager can be delegated to them. Maybe they become a mentor to somebody else and they recognize that as, you know, my boss is really asking me to step up and I get to kind of practice some of the skills that a warehouse manager does in order to show that I'm ready for that. So even though my promotion might not come for a long time because the person who is occupying that seat isn't necessarily close to retirement, I know that I'm continuing to be engaged in the process by being asked to do some of the tasks that the warehouse manager does. So that's a way of using stretch assignments or developing some things that you can do to delegate to different people in the organization that show an engagement. Great question. Thank you. Yeah, let's do one more. Who do we have? Stacy, let's see. Yeah, go ahead and read it. I can't see.
I think I would start with telling them I appreciate their passion and enthusiasm, and to sit down with them or with me for a plan expectations to get them there. Then the realization should unfold. Let them come to the realization themselves.
Excellent. Stacy, thank you for your comments about having a discussion. Number one, I loved how you recognize their enthusiasm and appreciate them. I like how you kept it as positive as you could. And then to be able to sit down with them and talk about the expectations. And I really liked how you're attempting to let them come to the next that conclusion. One way that we can do that is by simply going to the job description. Let's say someone in this case wants to be a branch manager and they're a picker today. So Stacy, to your thoughts, as well as the other people who have contributed, if you take a look at what the requirements of the job are and you start making some parallels with them, you can let them come to that conclusion themselves. So if you look at the branch manager job description, a couple of the first things that jump out at us is they need to be really good at decision making, and a couple of the behaviors are recognizing issues, problems, or opportunities, and determining an action needed. So maybe there's an opportunity to say to this particular picker who thinks that they're right for the job is, so when we rolled out this new organization process in the warehouse, what were some of the things that you did when this came out, or when we revised the routes of the trucks? What I remember that you did is, you were a little passive in that. You threw up some roadblocks. The manager had to really focus you to make sure that you would adopt that. If I'm looking at the job description here, I'm seeing someone who needs to approach something like this much more proactively. I see someone who needs to come up with some suggestions and some ideas rather than being very passive about it, or rather than dragging their feet on it and making their manager come to them and say, I'm sorry, this is the new job, you really need to do the routes this way. So when you can tie some of their past behaviors and how they've done something with the requirements of the job and show them that, if you could think that you're ready for this, but your past behaviors are not painting a picture that would show people that you are qualified for that job. Or you look down in some of the other things that you need to be able to read a profit and loss statement, or you need to be able to make strategic decisions based on incomplete information. Those are some things where you can point to and say, tell me what experience that you have in that, and when the inevitable answer to that is, well, I don't, I've not done that before. Great, then let's talk about how we can get you those things, but probably that's not going to happen in the time frame that you've communicated. Probably that's going to be a multi-year piece. So that would be my suggestion, and thank goodness it's very similar to some of the comments and questions that you guys have added on the call already. So thank you for your participation. Keep in mind that when you have these discussions with your people, that it is only a snapshot in time. Things can change. So it's simply where that employee is today. And that's why you need to keep having those regular check-ins. That's why it's important to use the performance management process that you know is already scheduled to have some of these discussions. So, for example, this particular person, when we took this picture of them, probably wanted something very different in life when we took another picture of this very same person a few years later. Okay, this is the same person, but when the first picture was taken, he probably had some different career ambitions, some different thoughts about where he wanted to go than when the second picture was taken. The same thing can hold true with our employees today. Just because they want something today or they have these particular career ambitions, life events happen. Things happen that might change what those are, and that's why it's important to have those conversations regularly and make sure that, you know what, the last time that we talked was about 12 months ago or about 6 months ago, and you had said that this and this and this were priorities for you, and we established a couple of options for you and ways that I can help you as the manager. Are those still valid now? Do we need to make any adjustments to that? Is there something else that might be going on or other thoughts that you've had since the last time that we've had this conversation? Those are critical to be able to most up-to-date information as a manager. So one of the things that's important to do is try to find the sweet spot. So let's assume that we know that an employee has certain skills and ability to do their job, and that's represented by that yellow circle that we have on the screen. What we want to do is then match that up with opportunities where the company has a need for a particular job. And we want to look where those skills and abilities of an employee overlap so that we can find out where that sweet spot is for our employees and identify opportunities that we have. Now, understand that these circles will change over time. An employee is going to grow or expand their abilities and skills over time, and the company is going to have changing needs in their different roles. It may have less of a need for roles that exist today. It may have more need for other types of roles maybe that don't even exist today. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to look for that particular sweet spot and where those matches are overlapping and where we can find opportunities for that. But these also aren't the only two things that we need to look at. We need to add a third dimension to that. And the third dimension is where an employee has ambition and passion. Now, I could be really, really good at something, but if I don't have any energy or passion around that, I'm not going to be as likely to perform, or I'm not going to be as engaged in the discussion. So a good opportunity to look at this is, there are some overlapping areas that we see, but we want to look at the overlap where there are opportunities for all three of them. So, for example, in this particular overlap that we see right here, I may have skills and ability and I may have great passion, but the company doesn't necessarily have a need for that. This is my 13-year-old son right now who has great skills and abilities on Xbox and has lots and lots of passion around it, but there's very few jobs out there, even in our industry, where they're going to get well paid for that particular skill set, right? In addition to that, there are opportunities where they have skills and ability and there is a job, but they don't have passion around that. Okay, again, that's not a sustainable piece. We need to be able to look where they have passion as well. And again, they might have great energy and passion for something, and the company may have a great need, but if they don't have the skills and ability to do it, then that's not going to be a success either. I could have all of the energy and passion about being a fabulous legal person or a wonderful leader of an organization, but if I don't have the skills and abilities to do it, it's not going to be a success. So we need to find where the areas are of overlap for all three of those. And that's what the sweet spot really is. That's where we need to go to the next level and find where that piece is. Once we identify where that middle overlap is, then we look for the training courses, the stretch assignments, the system knowledge, mentorships, whatever we have. And when we do that, what happens to the buy-in for the individual? When I go to an individual and we've had these discussions and we know we've identified training courses because they have identified where they want to go in their career path, what is the impact on the buy-in for them when I say, okay, we really need to take this training course, or we're going to match you up with this particular mentor, or you really need to learn these particular functionalities in our ERP because you've identified that you want to get into purchasing, or you've identified the need or the ambition that you have to be a manager. It's clear that the impact of the buy-in is that it goes up significantly. Now it's not just that I'm begging someone to take this course, and we're talking primarily about seasoned people. I'm not begging my 20-year veteran who's at the counter to take this course just because I need him to take a course. I'm doing it because he has identified that someday he wants to be in this other position, and this particular training class or mentor or stretch assignment helps get him there. The buy-in goes up dramatically. So, in addition to that, many organizations will also collect additional information when they're having these discussions. So some other pieces of information that could be collected during this time are, let's see, Openness to relocation. Perhaps there are opportunities that people have with multi-branches to be able to fill open positions elsewhere. It's important to have that conversation. And if they are open to relocation, where? Are there certain areas that they would like to go? Are there areas that they don't want to go? So it's important to collect that information there. Are they key talent? Are they someone that if they left the organization today, the organization would suffer, that would have great difficulty replacing? Are they in a key role? Is the organization such that the function of the company would be hurt if that person left? Are they a flight risk? And is that flight risk a good thing or not a bad thing? Making sure that we know that some people, if they're a flight risk, that might not necessarily be bad. But if we're getting rumblings or we're seeing behaviors, it's important to identify whether we think that they might be a flight risk and if we want to do something about it. What is the impact that they are having on the business, and what would the impact on the business be if they happen to leave the organization? And ultimately, what is their readiness timeline? If that particular picker thinks that he could be a branch manager, but he thinks it's going to be by Christmas, perhaps he can be a branch manager someday, but probably that time frame that he has identified by Christmas is inaccurate. So we'd still want to be able to develop, maybe he could be moved to the counter in the next 6 months, and maybe he could move into inside sales or outside sales a couple of years after that. It's important to identify the timelines for each of those as well. So what of this should you collect in yours? It really depends on the culture of your company. If you don't have a culture in your organization about having open career discussions with people, this may be a foreign concept to people, and you may want to start slow with it. If you already know that your managers are having robust conversations with their people about their career progress, perhaps your organization's culture will handle more of these types of discussions. So I'd like to take a time out now and open it up for comments, thoughts, and questions. Hopefully some of the discussion thus far has tripped your trigger on some things. Feel free to add them to the question list or the chat functions, and we'll take a look. So the first question that I see is, having discussions in employee reviews aren't really a part of our company's culture. So Doug, how do you recommend starting it? Thank you. That's a great question. If this is very foreign to you, my suggestion is start it slow. Okay? There's no reason why it needs to be an all or nothing thing and everyone is forced into having these. You need to start the conversation with the managers and explain to managers why it's important. Managers need to understand that they're not just responsible for performing the tasks of their job, but they're responsible for developing their people, and they're responsible for maintaining some sort of a plan for progress. So talk to those managers first. Do it slowly for them and maybe give them some suggested questions to start with. I've given you a couple of suggestions throughout these slides. So maybe there's some opportunities to share with them a couple of entry questions that they can start with to get their people thinking about it. Maybe there's a couple of managers that you know that are going to be more advanced at this, that you start with them and allow them to explore some of the career planning discussions with their people in their next performance review cycles. And then share some best practices with the other managers and get them up to speed or comfortable using them. Good question. Thanks. Another question here is, can these career discussions happen outside the employee reviews instead? Okay, that's a good question. And the answer is absolutely yes. Career discussions can happen whenever. My suggestion, though, is that since managers aren't used to having these, and this is not something that just comes up at staff meetings or regular one-on-ones, it's typically not really when these come up. And if you allow managers to do that, as long as they are having them, that's all that matters. We need to make sure that they are having them. But because it can be a little bit uncomfortable or difficult, if you bake it into performance management, you know for sure that those are going to happen. So yes, but left to their devices, probably managers are not going to have them on a regular basis. So it ends up being a very natural time in the employee review process to say, hey, I know that we haven't talked about this for a while. It's important for you and I to get on the same page and make sure that I understand any changes. Let's talk about your career as well, now that we've concluded our conversation on your performance over the last year. So it can be a natural extension of the performance management process, and that's why it's recommended there. But frankly, as long as those discussions are happening at any point in time, that's all that really matters. But most managers, again, left to their own devices, probably are not going to have them. Or they're going to say, well, I just had one of those conversations, when in reality it was more like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago when they had those. So that's why we suggest that they can be baked in to the performance management process. Any other questions, Mr. Producer, that you see? Okay. If you do have subsequent questions, feel free to email them to us. As mentioned, we will make sure that we publish the recorded session for this. For the past recorded sessions and for this one will be uploaded in the next couple of hours. You can see them at asa.net. Simply click on Education and then go to additional resources. That's where you will find the recorded sessions right now of the other two, and in the next couple of hours for this one. This concludes our webinar today. Let me take the opportunity right now to really thank the Women in Industry group in ASA for allowing ASA Education Foundation and the university to participate with you over these 3 webinars in 2015. It was absolutely our pleasure to be involved. Hopefully we added some value and allowed people to start thinking maybe in a little different way about performance management, but we really appreciated the opportunities to speak with you over the last couple of months, and look forward to seeing what great things that your organization comes up with in the future. Thanks everybody for your participation today.